Nikki, the podcast. Wake up.
Oh.
Oh my
Hey
God.
guys, welcome to the IBS Freedom Podcast. I am joined by my very sleepy co-host, Amy Hollenkamp, R to the D.
Flashback.
Okay, hold on, I'm asleep.
You're going so hard with this sleep idea. Oh my gosh. Okay, I need to contain myself.
Okay,
Uh,
we'll try it one more time and then we can bag it.
Okay.
All right, I'm
Okay.
asleep.
End of flashback.
Hey
And
everybody.
today, if you couldn't tell, we are talking about sleep. Sleep, my favorite topic.
Ooh.
So I hope that we, like you said before we started that, I hope we win an Emmy for that
Yes.
performance of like asleep Nikki and asleep Amy. If you're not watching this on YouTube, if this is audio only, then you really missed out. You should go check out the YouTube video of that because I'm sure it's going to be quite amusing. But
Oh my gosh. I'm like crying because I'm laughing. I'm physically trying to recover from that. It was
Hey,
just how hard you committed to being asleep
yeah.
that I wasn't expecting. I like assumed a really cute, like unrealistic sleep
No.
pose, and you went
something that's still
straight.
flattering.
Right. You went straight there, straight to the deep sleep. Oh
If
my
I-
gosh.
If I felt like spit would have showed up on the camera, I would have mustered like a little bit of drool also, because I
Oh
feel like
my
that could also be
gosh.
kind of a classic, but I figured it wouldn't really show up on the camera anyway, so what's the point?
Right. Oh my gosh. I am like hot because I'm sweating or because I was laughing so hard and like trying to control it because I had to do my role.
Yes, yes, and you executed it beautifully. I am so proud.
I don't know.
Especially
I was
since
losing my mind.
you're not usually the first to speak, so that was kind of a big step for you
True.
too.
I'm very one of these days I'm gonna have to introduce us
One of
and
these
try
days.
to really match the energy
The offer
that
is
you
always there.
present. But I just feel like you do such a great job with the energy of the intro that I don't know. I don't think I can live up to that. So
That's
I
right.
just
we won't mess with it. Besides,
Right.
I still, I have a role. I start us off, and then I always kick it to you of, all right, so we're talking about sleep, so give us a little primer on the sleep thing. So I always make you go first with like the actually clinically relevant stuff
Right.
anyway. So we share the load. Hashtag share the load. Okay,
Yes.
so to that point, we're talking about sleep and how it
Right.
affects the gut and how freaking important it is. But you want to give us a little bit of a primer or a little bit of a starting point, and then we will converse.
Yes. I think from a sleep something that I feel like so many people are not focusing as much time and energy on. There's so much focus on the diet side of things and the supplements that sometimes I'll talk to people and they're getting either really poor quality sleep. I think that's pretty common. They're waking up a lot in the middle of the night. Maybe they're having trouble falling asleep. And then sometimes just the hours are not enough, not sufficient. And it's so normalized in our culture, kind of like stress. We talk about stress and not getting sleep is a stressor in and of itself.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's this I'll sleep when I'm dead mentality is so prevalent in our culture that
burn the candle at both ends.
Right. And it's one of those things too where I almost have to press people and I have intake forms, so I'm not typically pressing too hard, but press them on like, because sometimes they'll be like, oh, I get enough sleep. And it's like, well, what does that mean exactly? And they're like, like 6 hours solid. And I'm like, oh, you probably need more than that. So there's, I think just having a reference point that's skewed because of our culture or maybe like how your parents slept, like what the people around you, how their sleep habits were. But I think some of the research on sleep and circadian rhythms in the gut health space have more recently been popping up and how important that can be at regulating the microbiome, motility, and I think just in general stress on the body. Your body needs to recover, and sleep allows your body to recover. So it's such an important piece, and I'm glad we're talking about it, because I oftentimes think, like stress, it's like an afterthought. Like, oh, you should be getting more sleep. But sometimes people that aren't getting enough sleep aren't probably paying as much of attention as they should to it.
Well, I find too, like the recommendations oftentimes are very non-specific, or they feel really like floaty, and then it's hard to actually make a change based on that. Like, eat more vegetables, or like eat vegetables. Like, okay, so if you have 1 serving of carrots a week, you can tell yourself that you eat vegetables. But like kind of quantifying it and having a benchmark or a goal, like I think we talked about last time, makes more sense. And that way you could basically assess and keep an eye on things, and you can know more discernibly, like, am I doing a good job at this? Yes or no? And I feel like similarly, sleep is such a thing where it's like, oh, get more sleep.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but how specifically? And that's where you can really get into picking apart, like you said, are you not getting enough sleep? Is it shifted? Like, are you like in some crazy night owl mode where you're going to bed super late, waking up super late, and you're out of sync with the rest of the world? Is it that, which did I say first? Like poor quality, not enough, or a shifted schedule, or something else in between? Like, trying to iron out, okay, what exactly about your sleep needs improvement? And how can we help your body rest and recover and rejuvenate itself before you have to go live another day of human life?
Right. Like it's what you're saying, so true. Like everything that we do, there almost has to be some level of investigation as to what's driving the dysfunction. Because a lot of times people know, like, oh, I need to get 8 hours, or like, oh, I'm going to try to get more sleep, but sometimes they just can't. Like, you know, they're waking up a lot, the quality's poor. Sometimes it is like more of a choice, and there can be things like they're just not going to bed at a particular time, and they're decent sleepers. But I think more often the clients that I talk to are struggling with the quality of their sleep. There's some that aren't getting enough hours because they're just not going to bed at a similar time each night. They don't really have a good nighttime routine. That's pretty consistent. But I think a lot of people too that I work with are trying pretty hard to get sleep, but it's frustrating because they can't. And there's lots of potential reasons for that we can get into, but you're right, it takes peeling back some of the layers of like, is this a bedtime issue? Is it a blood sugar issue at night that oftentimes causes people to wake up? Is it
a bed issue? Like, does your pillow or your bed totally suck? Like that also, you know, the chiropractor in me, I have a question on my questionnaires asking people, like, how old is your bed? And I remember somebody recently, I don't remember which patient it was, but somebody recently said that their bed was pretty new, I think like 6 months old. And they mentioned in the notes, they said, I used to get horrible sleep, and then I got this new bed, and now I sleep like a champion. So, like, if you have a really old bed or a really uncomfortable bed, or if you run really hot at night, maybe you need a bed that's going to, like, take away some of the heat from your body. Like, that might be worth considering, too. But, yeah, the thing that you're sleeping on can play a big role in this as well.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I'm someone who's very, very temperature sensitive at night, like for the longest time. And it took me some time to realize this, but I couldn't sleep really well in the same bed as my husband. Like I would get super hot, and then I'd like throw the covers off and then get super cold. Like I couldn't temperature regulate if someone else was in the room or in the bed, I mean. And it's because, like, I mean, if someone else is another 98-degree person is in your bed, it's going to change the whole temperature of the bed.
So what was your solution?
So
you kicked Armand out. Go sleep in the shed.
I had 2 solutions. A king-size bed helped, like, push him away. Get out of here. Get out of my zone. So a king-size bed helped, because I recognized, too, every time we went to, like, a hotel that was a king-size bed, I slept fine. Because he was further away.
Yeah.
There could be a gap.
Get away from me.
Right.
#marriage.
Get out of here. And then I also started using a chili pad. Have you heard of these?
I have. I was going to ask if you've ever used that, or the Ooler is the other one, right? They're the same company, but it's a slightly different product, right? Chili pad versus Ooler?
I think they're the same. Maybe. I could be wrong. Okay. I need to double check.
Or maybe like a next generation thing.
Yeah, I think it is a next generation thing. Okay. I think they had like an original one, but it's basically, it goes over your bed. It's almost like a mattress topper. And it has little, you're cringing because you're already cold listening.
This is my worst nightmare. I already know. So continue.
But it has little piping, like that water flows through the whole thing. And so it pumps water in and cools the water. So essentially it's like an air conditioner for your bed. That's how it's kind of marketed. So you're sleeping on like a certain temperature. And I find that sometimes it's different. Like usually I'll set it at around 64 or 65 degrees under me. And it helps me sleep. I sleep really well with a chili pad.
I've heard amazing things about it. I've debated getting one for my husband because he throws off heat like a freaking furnace.
Yeah, he would probably really like it. Again, I found it really helpful for sleep. And again, temperature, especially at night, can affect sleep too. Yeah. If you're not necessarily a great sleeper, that could be something to play around with.
Yeah. And even just the thermostat. Sorry to interrupt you, but
right, just the thermostat for sure.
I have a question on my sleep questionnaire where I ask them, what temperature is your thermostat set to at night? And then there's another checkbox like, do you and your family agree on this temperature? And I kid you not, one of my patients, I'll never forget, her husband, who was also a patient of mine, her husband grew up, I forget, in like Alabama or Mississippi, somewhere where it's hot and humid. And he always wanted it to be hot and humid. And I forget where she grew up, definitely not there, Switzerland or Germany, I think. And she would complain about it. But then I came to be that they kept their house at 80 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. And my poor patient was like massively fatigued. And yeah, that was a conversation to be had. I don't remember what they ended up doing with it, but like, no, but I don't even think I could sleep with that temperature. Like, I'm a corpse person, but I think that even for me, 80 degrees, I'd be like, oh, I'm done.
Yeah. I agree.
So I do the opposite of you. I have a heated blanket. It's just like a twin size one, but I preheat my bed in the winter and like the spring and the fall. But like I preheat the bed for a while. And then I get in and it's like boiling lava hot. And I'm just like, oh. And every single night, every night of my life, I get in bed and I'm like, oh, I love the heated blanket. And my husband laughs at me. Like, or I say, I hope the person who invented heated blankets is filthy stinking rich because they deserve it. But I always remark on how much I love my heated blanket and I leave it on and I cook with it for like half an hour or so. And then I turn it off before I actually go to bed. So.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Myself. Yeah.
Well, I know that, so the chili pad actually can heat up to 110 degrees as well. So it goes both directions. So if you're someone that is, but I would assume that it would be way cheaper just to get a heated blanket than to do a chili pad. I think, again, it's much more cost effective if you want a cooler bed than hotter bed. But I really do like the chili pad. I find it really helpful for me. And it's interesting too, like I remember like being in a dorm in college, and at the beginning there was no air conditioning in the dorm, so like, and we were there in like August.
And you went to school in Kentucky, right?
Well, this was actually at a school called Denison. That was my first year. I actually played basketball there very briefly and then transferred, but Denison is actually like a small liberal arts school in Ohio. It's kind of near Columbus, so like central Ohio.
Okay.
But still, I mean, it was like 95 degrees outside during the day and then, super hot at night. And I remember sleeping so horrible. And I just think it's such a big factor for so many people. And yeah, playing around with the temperature is a really good suggestion. Even thermostat, even like fans, too, in the room. It's so funny because Armand is like, does not like fans in the room. Like we're both like finicky about temperature, but like in opposite directions. But yeah, it's an interesting one, and it can regulate circadian rhythms too. Temperature can.
Yeah.
So again, if you're typically at a colder temperature at night, it might help with sleep, but it does vary, I think,
generally
person to
speaking. Yeah, and even for me, again, I'm a self-proclaimed corpse person, but even for us, like I think Mike keeps the thermostat at like 68 or 69 at night.
Yeah.
And then like I will pile up the blankets, but you're actually better off having a cool room with a bunch of blankets on you.
Yeah.
As opposed to having the heat turned up higher or having the air conditioner set to a higher temperature, because then at least you have the flexibility that you can remove a blanket if you need to.
Right.
But if you have that thermostat cranked up to like 72, 75, 80, you can't really do much about that other than maybe a fan or a chili pad. So where you set your thermostat is probably one of the first things to be addressed if you are having crappy sleep. What are some other like really basic moves for, do you know what that reference is from? I feel like maybe your husband would.
That's that one show with Kristen Bell.
Yes. Yeah, The Good Place. When
The
she's
Good
like,
Place.
You know what,
Okay.
Michael? You're basic.
Yeah.
So anyway, what are some other basic moves that you do to help people sleep better, even before we get into the nitty gritty of like falling asleep, staying asleep, circadian rhythm, etc.?
I think basics, usually with basic stuff, I like when I first work with a client to understand what's going on with their sleep, and see how it changes with some of the basic things. So one thing is nutrition in general. Like getting nutrition to be adequate can usually help a lot with sleep. Like if someone's under eating, I would expect that they could have really poor sleep.
Yeah.
So if under eating's at play, that's like primary step. So usually I'll be like, oh, let's check back in on sleep once we get nutrition up to where it needs to be. Typically, I will also try to help people establish like good light patterns. So trying to get some natural light in the morning to prime their body to understand that this is morning time. So it kind of anchors hormones and digestive processes and things like that in our body. If you have the master clock of the circadian rhythm being anchored by light patterns. So getting some natural light in the morning, I think, can be helpful. And that can be like through a window. I think obviously getting outside would be best, but we all can't do that. I have a window kind of right here. You can sort of see it getting some natural light on my face. But I think getting natural light can be really beneficial. Yeah. And I think the opposite's true with bedtime, is trying to avoid things like blue light that can affect melatonin release. Yeah.
And melatonin, again, for those of you who aren't aware, is something that it's a neurotransmitter or neurochemical that is released in your brain, and it's what tells you, okay, now is sleepy time. So it initiates sleep. It doesn't necessarily keep you asleep, but it initiates sleep, or it makes you sleepy. So continue.
And I think that limiting that, even if you're kind of wearing blue blockers, trying to kind of dim some lights at night, or like have kind of dimmer night light.
Mood lighting.
Mood lighting at night. I also think just in general consistency of bed and wake up times, if possible, is so important. I find too, and we've talked about it in the past, like one of the hardest parts that I think, having a child so stressful is how dysregulated sleep gets with like sleep timing and those sorts of things. We can maybe talk about that a little bit more, but I actually think that like sometimes people will never recover sleep timing, like sleep wake times, falling to sleep times for a long period of time, maybe ever. Like sometimes I'm talking to people who it's been 3 or 4 years since they had their kid, and they've just never gotten back to a good sleep cycle. But typically meal times, bedtime, wake times, I think could be helpful with circadian rhythms. Those would be probably the basic things I would have people try.
Let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
Do you advocate no screen time before bed?
I do. I do. I think there's people that still do. From what just working with people, I think it's a hard thing to break.
A hard sell.
Right. And I think the probably worst thing to do is be on your phone and it's this far away from your face. Especially if you don't have any blue blockers or anything that's kind of affecting the tint. My husband's a bad culprit of this.
I was just going to lean to the microphone and say, do you hear this, Michael Danessa? Do you hear this?
Oh my gosh.
Because my husband too.
Yeah, I don't know. And I even bought Armand blue blockers and he just doesn't wear them. I'm like, this is like this close to your face, shining blue light in, like it's right before bed. But we have some work to do, Nikki, with our husbands. But
even Mike, like we will sometimes watch YouTube videos in bed. Like if there's last night there was a new episode of You Suck at Cooking. Have you seen this channel at all?
No.
Oh, I'll send it to you later. So there was a new episode of You Suck at Cooking. So we kind of gathered around the phone, and when we watch things on my phone like that, 8 times out of 10, he will complain vehemently about the red filter app that I have.
Right. I have the red filter too.
Can you disable that? Can you turn that off? And I'm like, no, because it's for the exact purpose what we're using it for now. We are watching something on the phone. I could disable it if we weren't looking at the phone, but he gets all perturbed and I can't see it. It's all red. I'm like, oh, wow.
Right. Right. I have that on my phone and it always freaks people out. They're like, why's your phone red? I'm like,
my favorite is when I send screen captures to somebody, like a patient or a friend, and then the entire screen capture is like a pinkish reddish
tint.
My gosh. They're like, what's wrong with it? And I'm like, oh, my circadian rhythm. Let me tell you about it.
Right. Yeah. So again, I'm certainly someone that at times will be on my phone at night. Usually I try to have my blue blockers on and have some things to mitigate it. I have the red on my phone too. This kind of jazzy.
Oh, yours is redder than mine.
Yeah, mine. Mine, you click the home button. Is that how yours is? I know yours is an Android, right?
Oh, yeah, mine's an Android. Do you have an iPhone?
Yes.
Okay, maybe that's why. Yeah, so mine. Let me see if I can put it up to the screen. All right, so I have an app called Twilight. And I think if I click this, okay, maybe not. Oh, there we go. It very gradually got pinker, and now it's back to normal. That was very not compelling. It looks really pink, but yours is really, really red. Yeah, that's much,
people are like, what is going on?
Yeah, mine is gentler than that, but
that's why people are like, "What's wrong with your phone?"
Yeah,
it's like a demon has possessed it.
Yep, yeah, and I use the app on my phone, and I have one installed on my computer called Flux that does the same exact thing. And then I will wear my big geeky orange goggles in addition to that, and then that's kind of my normal jam. But yeah, I think it's such a hard sell, the idea of no screen time.
It is
before bed, because all of us just want to unwind for the day and look at our phones.
Right.
I've been trying to get better about that. I mean, again, my kind of defragment method for the evening is I'll watch YouTube videos, usually about Japan. And I'm planning my trip to Japan someday, so I'll watch something related to Japan, typically, or the occasional You Suck at Cooking video. Right. But yeah, that's my downtime. But I'm trying to get better, and I go kind of in spurts. I'm getting better about reading an actual physical book. For those younger viewers who might not be aware, we used to have things called books. And, it was like paper. So they would cut very thin slices of trees and then they would print words on it. And so I have some of these archaic books at my house that I'm working through gradually. But I'm trying to get better about like reading a physical book rather than watching like a Try Guys video or something on my phone. Right. So I'm getting a little bit better about that.
I'm the same way. I think like for me, I get into really good trends with, or like on a really good roll with reading. There are times where I'm just like, it's like 2 or 3 months I'm reading every night before bed. And then other times I definitely will be more on my phone. And I think, again, there's ways to mitigate it. I think blue blockers helps. If you feel like that's like just a really great way to unwind, I'm usually not going to like have someone stress too much about it. One thing too that I heard from Dave Mayo, who does a lot of circadian rhythm stuff, he was saying, I messaged him because I was talking to a client and they were telling me, they were kind of asking if blue blockers were worth it and things like that. I was bouncing some ideas off of him, and he was saying that it's actually pretty important to dim like your surrounding lights. Like, and he kind of argues now that it might even be more important than like blue light, like dimming some of the lights in your house, because a lot of LED, like all the lights in our house are crazy, like LED, super energy efficient.
Yeah, ours too.
It's like it burns through your retinas to have them on full blast.
Yeah.
But a lot of the old school light bulbs aren't like that, and you can actually buy. I've debated on buying some. They have some that are more circadian rhythm based, and I don't know if they just change throughout the day, like the amount of light that's coming out. I haven't done tons of research on it, but basically he was just saying like it's helpful, like if you're in a room, like dimming the lights a little bit, or having like a light next to your bed that's a little bit less bright, like an LED light. The
quantity of photons hitting your eyeballs matters too.
Right. So I thought that was interesting, like to think about it in that way too. Like if you are wanting to watch some TV or something like that, just turning the lights off.
Yeah. Or even like on the phone, anytime I'm using my phone at night, I'm usually turning the brightness of the screen way down to the minimum. Because similarly, like the phones can get really bright. And I know that because I had a little bit of insomnia last night and I was up a bit late. And I just like went out to the couch and I was playing on my phone and like watching some Japan videos or something on my phone for a bit. And then my Marco Polo app acted up. I was watching a friend's Marco Polo. So I was like, oh, I'll restart my phone. And I forgot that my Samsung, when I restart it, it is like the full power of the sun coming out of that phone. It is so bright. And it startled me. And I had to turn it away from me. And it was like a flashlight just shining around the room because I was waiting for it to reboot all the way. But that welcome screen was so intense.
You got like a new brain lesion from that.
I did. I tried a couple of neurons there. But now here's, speaking of my insomnia, because I will admit to, so I try to be realistic, and that's why I asked, like, the no phone thing. There's a spectrum of ideal versus super not ideal, and then there's kind of everything in between. So in all honesty, the ideal scenario is that you just go pitch a tent in your backyard and you camp and you sleep out. No, I'm shit you not. And you go sleep in the wilderness every night of your life. That's the ideal scenario. How many people are willing to do that, however? Not so much. But like when we took my now 5-year-old camping for the first time last year, I got the best night of sleep of my life. And I was on a crappy air mattress. It made no sense, but it was cool. And I was listening to like the birds and the crickets and the squirrels or whatever. And we went to bed early because she's 5. So we only stayed up past sunset a little bit and did a campfire. So between the early bedtime and being outdoors in that tent, I got an amazing night of sleep. And I had my Oura ring on. So of course I looked at my data in the morning and I was like, oh yeah. But I think that was the most deep sleep I've ever gotten in the 6 months of having the Oura ring. but I'm not going to camp every day of my damn life.
Yeah.
So,
no, I'm with you.
You know, camping, preferably in a cave every day of your life and having no exposure to computers or screens of any kind is probably the ideal scenario.
Yeah.
You know, what we're talking about, like no screen time and no TV for at least an hour or two before bed, and blue light blockers, and dimming the light, and like doing yoga and meditation and breath work, and like all of the hippy dippiest stuff you could think of is probably like the next best thing. And then way over here at the other end is like what is more common, like the super dysregulated circadian rhythms and the people who are getting way too little sleep or really poor quality sleep. And if you can inch your way up the ladder, that has value, even if it means that you're looking at your phone at night. But
right.
You know, if you're going to do that, wear some dorky orange goggles.
Right.
And
exactly.
put the app on your phone. They're free apps. Like there's no reason not to do it.
Yes.
So, you know, it's you have to figure out how you want to live this human life, assuming you're a human listening to this.
Right.
I'm not going to judge. Like if a dog is a listener, I'm not going to judge that. If Chip wants to listen, then, you know, more power to you, Chip. That's another thing too. Pets. Now, does Chip sleep with you guys, or does he get confined to his own bedroom?
He does not sleep with us. We've like gone back and forth. He sleeps downstairs. He's actually a very good puppy, according to what I've heard. Like new puppies usually like will wake their owners up in the middle of the night. Like he was always someone we like put a pee pad down, even when he was like had to use the bathroom. He knew how to poop and pee on the pad, and then he'd just go right back to bed. He never cried. He was like the ideal puppy from a sleep standpoint. But yeah, he does not sleep in our bed, but I could assume that could create some drama too from a sleep standpoint.
Well, it could lead to poor quality sleep, and this is something like it could be hard to tell an animal lover this, but like I know I'm going to call out my mom. So Mom, if you're listening to us now, I have told her for years that she needs to lock her cat out of the bedroom at night, because her cat will either like lay on her neck and purr at the top of his lungs, by the way. Like he'll lay on her neck and purr, or he will make bread on her neck like and stab her with the claws. And my mom will wake up and complain about getting a shitty night of sleep. And I'm like, and then she'll talk about, oh, Tuxedo started bothering me at 3 a.m. and I couldn't fall back asleep. And I was like, lock his ass out. Like, he'll be fine. He's a cat. Cats are resilient. They're fine. And she's like, well, but then we would have to lock out the dogs and the other cat, because they have 2 dogs, 2 cats. And it's like this whole drama. And I'm like, lock them all out. I don't know. Or like keep the dogs in the bedroom with you, because they have their dog beds and they don't bother anybody, but lock the cats out. Who cares? They'll figure it out. They might run crazy for like a night or two and keep you up the first night or two, but eventually they're going to get the memo. But like, if you have pets that are sleeping in the bed with you, I love that. And it's so snuggly and so perfect. And like, occasionally when we had beagles, our beagles would crawl up in bed with us in the middle of the night, and it was so precious. But also we would always complain every time Bonnie and Clyde got into bed with us. We'd be like, yep, we didn't get a good night's sleep, because inevitably Clyde would be like up at our level on the bed. Like he would have his head like between our 2 pillows pretty much, and he would be kind of like lengthwise. And then Bonnie would curl herself in a little Bonnie ball and tuck herself behind our knees. So one of us would have Bonnie behind the knees, and then you can't flip over and you can't move, because then you would disturb her. And you can't really roll over much, because then you would squish Clyde. And it was so cute. The animal lover in me really wanted to let that happen, but it was so difficult the nights that they did decide to do that. So usually we didn't let the beagles sleep with us. It was just like on the occasional occasion that would happen.
Yeah, like I think getting some snuggles in prior to bedtime and sending them off to his...
I don't know. I think that's just mean, because then they get excited and they think that they're going to snuggle with you all night.
Well, we'll snuggle on the couch, not in the actual bed. Okay. I'm not taking him up to the bed and...
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wouldn't snuggle in your bed and then the dog or the cat is like, yay, tonight's the night, and then get out of here.
No, we don't do that. But I think, too, from like a a lot of times I'll think about like what factor of the rhythm's disrupted for certain clients that I work with. Some of them have very dysregulated rhythms. Like, I don't know if you've ever worked with a night shift person or two,
yes.
but like, it's really worth bringing up night shift work. And I've worked with a few night shift workers, and I mean, I've found that it's really hard to get their guts moving in the right direction when they're working night shift, because their rhythm's just flopping, because they're not usually sticking to their night shift rhythm on days that they're off. So their body, right, but their body never can like regulate itself. I totally get like most of the people in your life are not on night shift, so they're gonna have parties and things like that you wanna indulge in and be a part of, and that's like living your life.
Heaven forbid you're married or you have kids, and then like you have to get your kids to school, or like you want to see your spouse every now and then, like forget about it.
Right. And I will say, like, the few clients that I've had that have been night shift workers, I mean, I just think like that's such a large hill to overcome that, you know, it takes probably trying to find something new that's not night shift to really make some big strides. You could mitigate it in some ways, but I just think that that's such it dysregulates things so much that it's really hard for your body to cope. I had a really close friend too who is a nurse, and we hadn't seen each other in a little bit, and I ran into her, and she was like, yeah, I was feeling like awful. And she's like, oh, I stopped working night shift and everything. Like, I felt amazing. Like, it was all night shift. Yeah. And that's such a hard thing because it's your job. Like, that's how you make money. But if there's any way to kind of easily or like not too painfully switch to a non-night shift.
Well, and it's easier to take a probiotic than it is to get a new job.
Right.
Or it's easier to take, you know, the latest supplement or the latest antimicrobial or whatever. Like, oh, I just need to get this fancy formulation of oregano, and it's like, oh man, you might need a different life. In some ways. And I was going to say, nurses are the worst, because what I've noticed with some of my nurse patients, not all, but most, if they do night shift, it's never purely night shift. So even like a lot of nurses, and like, bless all of you that you put up with this stuff for the sake of keeping people from not dying in the middle of the night. Because like, I don't know how you do it. But a lot of the time it'll be like, oh, I'm on night shift this week. And then next week I'm on morning shift. And then the next week I'm on night shift. And then the next week I'm on afternoon shift. And it's like, how is your body going to regulate anything for anything? Yeah. It would be easier. And I've had this discussion with some patients. It would be easier, like if you want to work at that hospital and you love your job and you don't want to get a new job, it would truthfully be easier to say, hey, I volunteer as tribute. I'm just going to be the night shift person every week indefinitely. Right. And then it's like, at least you have the 5 days of the week or whatever where you're on the same schedule, and then you just have to figure out what to do, like what's a happy medium for the weekend. Like maybe you sleep a little bit at night and you still sleep a little bit in the day. Yeah. But that's easier than every week or every 2 weeks flip-flopping back and forth, and then your body's not going to know what to do. So nurses. And I also had another nurse that I worked with who was getting no light. Like, she wasn't working night shift, but she was working in surgery, and there was like no windows. So like she'd go to work and it'd be dark. No windows, then she'd go home and it'd be dark. And I think that can be a little bit, be hard on your body too, because it's not like she's working night shift, but like she'll be in an 8-hour, 6-hour surgery and not be able to get out. So it was kind of tricky. We were trying to get some sun, like in for lunch or something like that, like something to get her any outdoor light to like anchor her rhythm at all. But I think those kinds of things, it's interesting just to kind of take note of. I even think about my dad sometimes. He worked at General Electric. He was a
an engineer, and he worked in the basement of this building for like 30 something years.
Oh,
And even
gosh,
like,
yeah.
again, you don't get light in for so long. He would get pretty bad, I wouldn't necessarily call it seasonal depression, but he would get so excited when the time changed and it would be light when he came home from work.
Yep.
Or so he would, I think, again, like the lack of light in the winter really sucked for him. So it's just something to kind of be cognizant of, how much natural light you're getting. And vitamin D is great, but even just that light hitting your eyes to anchor the rhythm.
Well, you just get a liquid vitamin D and then you drop it in the eyes.
Drop it in the eye.
Yeah, that's all. No,
ignore the burning. Ignore the burning. In the eye.
Yeah, just ignore the burning.
That's normal.
But yeah, I think the light. I think also, like, again, if you do have to have a dysfunctional or atypical circadian rhythm, work around it to the best of your ability. So like I said, like, if you're a nurse, you're better off off just saying, I will be the night shift person forever, rather than doing this flip flop. There was another woman I worked with, and she was a single mom. So she was juggling like being a mom, and then 3 or 4 nights a week, she worked night shift at a bank. And we talked about it. She's like, no, I actually really like my job. Like it pays well. I only have to work like the 3 or 4 nights a week and I can support my family. But she was exhausted just all the time. And we talked about her sleep, and she was like, well, I'll try to nap like on, I think she would work like Saturday through Tuesday or something. And she was like, yeah, on the days that I work, I will try to come home and nap, but like my brain is too wrapped up and I can't fall asleep. So I end up just not sleeping for that part of my life. And I told her, I said, try this, pick a time, like 1 o'clock. Pick a time where every single day, no matter if you are working or you are off or you're on vacation, whatever, pick a time where you lay down and you nap, theoretically, for an hour or 2. And, if you lay down and you never fall asleep and it just is like quiet time for you, that's okay. If you lay down and you actually fall asleep, great. But like, go into it with no pressure, no expectations, just tell your kids. And luckily, like, I think one of her kids was like 12, so that one could kind of watch the others a little bit.
Yeah.
But tell your kids that you need some quiet time and some rest, and let them do whatever. And then you go lay down for an hour or 2. And after she had done that for a week or 2, she said it really, really helped. She was like, oh, now on the weekends, my body knows that like 1 o'clock is nap time. So now I can go to sleep on the weekends, because now my body is, at least, it's like the circadian rhythm, the bulk of the circadian rhythm was still shifting all around, but at least she had that anchor of the 1 o'clock nap time. And she wasn't stressed. Like on the days that she didn't need a nap, she just laid there and it was like quiet meditation time. And on the days that she needed a nap, her body was able to get into that and actually sleep. But that was really, really helpful for her. And also she was exhausted because she lived in a moldy house. So that was a big portion of it too. So fatigue could be sleep related, and it could be other stuff as well. But that I found was helpful, to just give her that little bit of an anchor around the dysfunction of the rest of her circadian rhythm. That made a big difference.
And I think that that's a really good point, like trying to mitigate some of the effects that you might have with having kind of dysregulated cycles, even if you're like a new parent and your sleep's all dysfunctional because of a new baby, and you just never know what the night's gonna bring. I think there's an aspect of building resilience as much as possible around knowing that things are going to be dysregulated. So like what you're saying, trying to schedule like a nap in, or schedule even just some stress management as well. Like, I think that goes across the board for sleep. If you feel like you're just stressed out to the max, whether it's from poor circadian rhythms, like dysfunctional rhythms at the moment, or just not consistent rhythms, but even just general stress, I do tend to see, if you're doing more stress management, like having an exercise that you're doing daily, sleep can improve at night, because you don't have, like, again, it just helps prevent cortisol surges at night or dysregulated stress responses at night.
Yeah. Well, and I've seen that pop up on the Aura user group online that like when people talk about, I think deep sleep specifically, people swear up and down. They're like, nope, exercise has been the best thing for my deep sleep. And I want to thank you, my dear Amy, because last time we spoke, and I reconfess that I'm not a worker outer, but I would like to be, I have worked out 3 times since our last.
Whoa. Look
And
out.
here's the key to rabbit trail on this for a second. So I was like inspired after talking to you last week, and I thought, all right, I need to do this, and it's like the perfect time of year that I can go out and I can run outside before it gets brutally hot and humid here in the South. So I thought, all right, I'll like get out my gear or whatever, my outfit. And I'm going to be honest, I don't love running. Like I enjoyed it more when I was better at it. Like I was in really good physical fitness because of rowing. And then like running became easier. But now that I'm more out of shape, like I don't enjoy running. So I thought about it. I was like, I'm not going to make it a habit forever if I don't enjoy it. So let me ask you this too. So you're sheltered because you had not heard of You Suck at Cooking on YouTube. Highly recommend. Have you heard of the Fitness Marshal?
I have not. I have not.
Oh, I'm going to send you I'll send you my playlist. So he is hysterical. He is a guy that choreographs dances to various pop music, and they are a workout. And his commentary is just so hilarious. And sometimes he'll have his boyfriend as one of the backup booty dancers.
Oh, nice.
Because he has 2 backup dancers with every video. And sometimes his boyfriend Cameron is one of the backup booty. And Cameron is so hysterically bad at dancing compared to Caleb Marshall that it's just all the YouTube comments are like, "We're with you, Caleb."
Oh my gosh.
Cameron represents all of us. And it's
my gosh.
I'm like, I will watch these videos when I'm not even working out because I want to watch Cameron, and I crack up at the commentary or I crack up at the boyfriend sucking so bad at the dances.
Oh my gosh.
But I did, like this morning, I did an hour of dancing in my living room with the Fitness Marshal, and it was fun, and like I'm looking forward to doing it again. And actually, I think that's why I had insomnia last night, because one of the songs was stuck in my head, and I was like, oh, I have to listen to that again. And I was going through YouTube, saving more videos to my playlist for the morning. But then I was like listening to all this like pop music, and I was getting all jazzed up, excited for my workout in the morning. So sometimes it'll bite you on the butt. But I will send you the Fitness Marshal because it's like the best thing on YouTube ever. And
awesome. I need to
be doing it.
I need to check that out. I love dancing, so like I could totally get into that. We were dancing. Armand was playing some video at lunch, and I like dancing really crazy and seeing how Chip like responds, because he gets all excited, but like is kind of annoyed because he's excited at first because I'm like moving around and he's like, oh, something's happening, but like nothing happens towards him, so he kind of gets frustrated. But he does like bounce around, gets on his 2 legs, and
funny. I'll send you my playlist for the
yes,
I think you're gonna enjoy it.
I'd be excited to hear that. But
that's
like awesome.
Zumba-esque, but in my opinion better.
Okay.
And more funny. Because again, his commentary, he'll just like put in little clips where you're like, what?
Well, and I love that you said he's funny, because I find sometimes with like group dance stuff, sometimes the instructor takes it way too seriously. At times.
Does not.
Okay, good. Because I feel like sometimes it's like, you do know that this is just like a fun group Zumba class. Sometimes they're just too intense for me. Like the instructors, the vibe's not right.
I can't do that.
But I'm glad that you're getting your move on. It sounds like.
I know. I'm very excited, and my abs are a little bit sore because there's a lot of like hip kind of moves.
Yeah, some gyrations, some hip gyrations.
Exactly, gyrations. That's the word I was looking for. This is a good point too. While we're not talking about anything academic, and this is just us rabbit trailing, I had a dream about you the other night.
Oh,
Do you want to know?
of course.
More?
Of course.
So, okay, so I've been tweaking some of my supplements, and I think that one of them is I usually have dreams anyway. Like I have a good amount of REM sleep per the Oura Ring at least. I
Yeah.
usually dream. I don't always remember them, but like at least a few times a week I remember something about a dream I had. But the last couple nights I've had particularly weird and noteworthy ones, and
Hmm.
I made a mental note to try to remember some of this for you. So all I remember now was something, and I almost sent you a Marco Polo, and then I was like, no, save it for the podcast. So there's something where like you and I were getting ready to record the podcast, but we were
Mm-hmm.
together in the same room, and we were in a library of some sort. So we were like at one of these
Classy.
big, yeah, like a big table, like a study table at a library, and we had 2 hours until the recording. And I told you, hey, I need to go do something. I'll be back for the recording. And you were like, cool. So I left and I helped my best friend from college, Paige, move a bunch of furniture. And there was some commentary that like her husband, Mike, and she both had enough furniture to furnish an entire house because there was like a lot of furniture. The weird thing is they've lived together for like 3 years. And I don't know why I was moving them in my dream, but I went to go help them move. And then I realized I was like, oh, I'm going to be late for the podcast. And I was like booking it to the podcast back to the library like you do. And I got to the library and it was like, basically, it was like 3:01 or something. I was like, we were supposed to start at 3. And I was rushing. And then I was trying to get in. And I became aware that there was some sort of an audience, like a studio audience situation in the library, mind you. And I didn't want to go in the door and walk through the audience to get up on stage with you. I thought that would be too weird. So I was trying to go in the back door, but the back door, I mean, I say door very loosely. The back door, there was like this crawl space situation where I could go like pop out the back of the stage or whatever. And there was a lady trying to get through the crawl space and she was taking forever and was like plugging it up basically. And I was like, hey, like, can you like move and let me in? Because I've really got to get in there. And she reluctantly allowed me. And she like backed out of this weird crawl space situation. And I kid you not, the crawl space majestically turned into, it was about this high. I gestured, it was like a foot high and like 2 or 3 feet wide.
Oh, this sounds like a nightmare.
It was a rectangle. And it was small enough that like I tried to get to you. I really did. But like it was not as tall as my head is tall. So like I put my face up to the hole and like my face wouldn't fit in the hole. So I was like, well, the rest of my body's definitely not going to fit. My head doesn't fit in the hole. So now I'm panicking because it's like 3:05 and we were supposed to start the podcast at 3. So then I was like, I don't have a choice. I have to go through the audience. And I went to the actual proper door. And I opened up the door to go through the audience of like 30 or 40 people who were watching us do this podcast. And you were there. You were up on this, like, now the table is kind of up on a little bit of a makeshift stage of sorts. And you're recording the podcast. And you replaced me. Yeah, Dream Amy was a jerk. I mean, I also put her in a little bit of a pinch, but Dream Amy replaced me.
Oh no.
And there was some other chick there, and I just like awkwardly go up to the table and sit down anyway, like, hey, I'm here. And then you were basically done. And you were like, okay, that's a wrap for today. And then I later found out that the girl was a nutritionist, but I don't remember her name. But yeah, you replaced me. And then I found out somewhere in the scheme of this, I found out that the reason why we had to start the podcast precisely at that time was it was being broadcast as a skit on Saturday Night Live.
Oh my gosh.
So
we need to get someone to interpret this dream that has some credibility.
Yeah, if anybody has any dream interpretation experience. But I think that's why like the podcast episode was only like 5 or 8 minutes long. So by the time I tried to get through the weird tunnel thing and made it, I missed the whole thing.
So maybe I didn't replace it. Maybe like there was a Saturday Night Live that was like, we need someone in here.
Maybe
it wasn't me.
I will give you that much credit, at least. I feel like Dream Amy wouldn't replace Dream Nikki. But
No, I wouldn't. But I'm really curious if anyone has any interpretations, especially the interpretation of not being able to fit through a hole. What does that mean?
A 1 foot by 3 foot rectangle.
Right. I think, it's interesting you talk about dreams. I one thing we haven't talked about, and I know we've talked about it at some point, but is mouth taping for sleep. I was someone that definitely, I feel like, has benefited from mouth tape. I know we've talked about how it seems to be sometimes hit or miss with people. But if you breathe through your mouth, the theory is, again, if you tape your mouth shut, you're breathing more through your nose. It's kind of a more natural way of breathing at night. You're usually not over breathing then when you're sleeping. And it keeps you a little bit more less stressed if you're breathing through your nose.
You actually get more oxygen to the brain if you breathe through your nose as opposed to your mouth. So even like mouth breathing during the day isn't super ideal either.
Right.
But I tell my patients when I think it's relevant, I say, look, like if you are breathing through your mouth at night, or I joke, if you're catching flies like that at night, then you might snore and drive your spouse crazy.
Right.
But it's kind of like your brain is anemic for a third of your life.
Yeah. And
then how do we expect the vagus nerve or any neuron in your whole body to work if you basically have anemia for a third of your life?
Right.
It's technically a hypoxia, not anemia, but like I think more people are familiar with the term anemia than anything else. I first learned about that. It was Mike Mutzel's podcast, High Intensity.
So funny you say that because I learned about it there too.
Yeah. And he interviewed a dentist who I now follow on Instagram randomly enough.
Is it like Mark Buhaney or something?
Yeah, something like that.
He has kind of an interesting last name, and it's kind of pronounced weird. So I don't
remember.
Like quote me on it, but I think it's like Buhaney or something like that. And he runs the site Ask the Dentist, I think.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that he also interviewed someone named Sarah Hornsby. You heard of her? She does like myofunctional therapy.
Oh, okay.
I actually interviewed her. Maybe again we can bring her on. She's really interesting for myofunctional issues and digestion.
Yeah.
But she talks a lot about mouth taping too. But it's a really interesting, weird thing. I usually have to bring it up in a way that's like, oh, this might sound really weird so like bear with me. Sometimes I'll be like, at least like look into it.
I straight up tell people this is going to be the weirdest recommendation I make today.
Right.
And you're going to think I'm a crazy person, but try it and see.
Yeah.
I tried it and I didn't notice a difference personally. And I was really optimistic because I feel like a slug in the morning.
Yeah.
Just like the neurons are not neuroning. And I was so excited thinking, oh, this is the answer. So not everybody experiences benefit, but certainly like the people who, certainly if you snore, guaranteed that you're breathing through your mouth at night if you snore. So just ask your spouse or ask your roommate if you snore. Because if you think about it, like try to snore with your mouth shut. You can't. Like you have to have your mouth open, right? That was another good visual for the YouTubers right now. But the snoring is number one. The other ones that I hunt for are, do you need to drink water at night or do you need to drink water first thing in the morning? Like you wake up and you're parched. Do you wake up with a dry mouth? Like notably dry, like all the saliva has shriveled up. And lesser relevance, but sometimes will tip me off is, do you wake up with a stuffy nose that was not stuffy when you went to bed?
Yeah.
So I fish for those questions in my intake forms, and when people answer like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of those positively, then I bring up the mouth taping idea.
Yeah, and one other one too to think about is like if you're a grinder, like if you go to your dentist and your dentist is like, well, you're grinding, sometimes your jaw will try to shift positions to get more like airflow. And that can be an indication that you might be breathing through your mouth as well. That's something to look out for. But yeah, I think it's something that's really easy to try. It's weird for sure, but it's not overly expensive. I found when I do it, I get more REM sleep. So I dream more, and they're more vivid dreams. That's what I noticed when I mouth taped. I would say I felt maybe slightly better energy-wise, but it wasn't anything like major, like maybe like a 5% change. But I do think I noticed a benefit, and I've definitely seen other people that I've worked with where it's been like, whoa, a game changer from a sleep standpoint. So yeah, it's definitely worth a shot if you know you're like snoring a lot, breathing through your mouth at night. Your partner says that you're breathing through your mouth at night, trying some mouth tape. Yeah. It's an interesting.
It's really cheap. You just get the paper tape or the 3M micropore tape. It's like $4 for the roll, and then away you go, and you can try it out for a while. And then they make fancier tape if you really get hooked on it. But start off with the cheapo tape from CVS or Walgreens and see where it gets you. I would say when I bring up mouth taping with patients, again, if they answer some of those questions affirmatively, I would say like 80% of the time people come back and they're like, I'll be damned.
Yeah.
It's helpful. And some people, like 10 or 20% are like, oh, this is the best thing ever. And then probably 20% of people are like, meh, or they say it was just too weird and they can't do it.
Right.
My mom needs to mouth tape. In addition to kicking her cat out of the bedroom, she really needs to mouth tape. And she tried it for like a night and was like, I was spending the night at her house that night for whatever reason. And I like came downstairs in the morning and she was like, you're trying to kill me. Like overly dramatic. Like I woke up and I had to rip off the tape and it was scary. I'm not doing that ever again. I was like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So do as I say, not as mom do. But it can be really helpful for some people. And again, it's cheap, but it's easy.
Right. And I found too, sometimes people that feel a little bit uncomfortable at first with it, because it can be kind of weird if you're like more of a mouth breather at night to all of a sudden have this thing on your mouth can take a little time to get used to. Sometimes wearing it for a little bit prior to bed can help ease into it a bit. Sometimes it sounds is weird.
You could pair it with those nasal opener upper strips, the breathe right strips, and sometimes that'll help. I have had some, like I remember one patient I talked with a month or two ago, and he had like all of those questions, but when we talked about it, he can't breathe through his nose. And we were trying to determine, I was like, is it a deviated septum? Like, can you breathe through one versus the other? And he was like, no, they just both kind of suck. And one of the things we talked about was maybe sending him to an ear, nose, throat doctor to just get evaluated to see, like, is there anything that could be done? But some people might just not have the bony structure to breathe through their mouth or breathe through their nose exclusively. And then that kind of stinks. But I think most people can do some combination of the mouth taping and the breathe right strips and get some better airflow and some better oxygen to their brain. Certainly. So it's worth a try.
Yeah, and I think if you are having trouble and there's like any issues, one thing that you could do is look into like myofunctional therapy. If there's any myofunctional issue that might be at play as well, other than just like maybe deviated septum or something like very structural. And myofunctional stuff can be somewhat structural, but can usually be helped in some way. That could be another. That could be another area that you can look into. Again, Sarah Hornsby, I'd recommend. She has a site called My Faceology. She's really interesting, and we did a 2-part like YouTube discussion where like we talked about how myofunctional issues affect the vagus nerve, because if you're breathing through your mouth, your tongue's usually sitting low in your mouth, and your tongue being up against your soft palate is actually like helps keep the vagus strong. So like as you work on myofunctional issues, if they're present and if your tongue's not in the right position, I know this sounds like really kind of out there and weird, but if your tongue's not sitting in the right position, it could lead to more weak vagal tone. So she's found that a lot of times working on myofunctional issues helps with GI function. She just has noticed that it tends to help. And she said sometimes it's because people with myofunctional issues are taking in a lot of air. And even kind of taking in so much air when they're chewing and swallowing seems to create some problems. But she also, and we kind of theorized that maybe if someone has, like through their whole life, hasn't had their tongue in the right position, and vagal tone might not be great with a lot of these people that have myofunctional issues, that it could be a bigger player in a couple different ways from a digestive standpoint.
Yeah, that makes sense. Interesting. I don't think, because I know the people who tend to listen to our podcast and our stuff, I don't want people to think like, this is the holy grail I've been looking for. I'm going to run right out. This is the answer, and have it go through the basics. Like, are you iron deficient? Is your thyroid out of whack? Like, is your nutritional diversity and therefore your microbiome diversity in the toilet, pun intended? Like, go through some of the basics probably first before you go hire somebody thinking that this is like the answer to your vagal tone problems. And also, like, I wouldn't jump to that immediately if you also don't have some stress management stuff in place.
Right.
Like, if you hate your job or you hate your spouse and like you're going through life literally or metaphorically grinding your teeth because everything about life sucks, you might be better off spending the money on therapy or a meditation class as opposed to jumping to like the myofascial things thinking that it's going to be a miraculous cure-all for your vagus nerve. But I think that it could be an interesting thing to pursue, and for some people it could be really relevant. So I think it's a tool to keep in the back of your pocket.
Right. And I've had a few patients where, like, I actually have a patient right now where I think it's very relevant. Like her jaw, like the structure of her jaw, like she's debated surgeries, like she's been to a lot of dental professionals and have been advised by a bunch of people as to like, oh, there's definitely some issues there with her bite is a little bit, I can't remember. I think it's a pretty strong overbite. And it kind of has messed with the structure of her mouth, but still some of the stuff that we're working on outside of that's still extremely beneficial, but there could be a bigger factor in her case with some of these bite issues. But I think you're completely right. Like most of the time, like, she's more the rarity than what I typically see. Most of the time it's not going to be this major issue, especially I think typically, dental stuff is usually monitored. I think there's, again, exceptions, obviously, but I think most of the time people that have issues in that realm usually are doing stuff to help. But there are the exceptions where I think it could help to do a little bit of a deeper dive with a therapist, like a myofunctional therapist, or things to help. I think with kids, it's kind of interesting too. There's with kind of structure, like development structure of the jaw and things like that. Like some of the work they're doing is really interesting there. But yeah, it wouldn't be the first. You don't want to jump over key foundational pieces to jump to like a myofunctional issue.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be something where like you log on to the SIBO Facebook forums and people are like, yes, I found it, guys. This is the thing that cured my SIBO.
Right.
I don't think it's going to be the holy grail, but I could see how it would be helpful, certainly.
Right.
I think tool in the toolbox. Let's talk about nutrition, and specifically let's zoom in on carbs, because I know like carbs and sugar and blood sugar plays a big role in the sleep thing. I remember, even way back when I started taking classes with Karazian, and he would talk about like the patient who particularly the patients who wake up in the night with like a shot of energy, like all of a sudden just like, they're not just awake, they're awake. Like immediately think blood sugar, because cortisol, the so-called stress hormone, goes up throughout the course of the night as you're sleeping. And its primary purpose is not actually to be a stress hormone. The primary purpose of cortisol is to slowly release glucose from your liver by liberating glycogen so that you don't starve to death in your sleep. So as you sleep for longer and longer and you go longer and longer without eating, you're pulling more of that glycogen out of your liver. And one of the things that he talked about was, if your blood sugar regulation is shit during the day and you're having all these highs and lows, then you're not going to be able to normalize your blood sugar at night. And if you don't have the cortisol to support that and pull the glycogen out of the liver, or if your adrenals are just shot and you have no cortisol at all, then, I mean, like not at all, but like relatively low cortisol, the next line of defense, again, to keep your blood sugar from going totally hypoglycemic and potentially starving to death in your sleep, the next thing that your body does if it needs blood sugar is adrenaline. So you get this release of adrenaline, and it's literally like, okay, boom, you're awake. I haven't seen many cases where people say that. Like usually when I talk to people who wake up in the night, they're like, no, I'm just kind of awake. I'm not like super energized. It's just like, oh crap, I'm awake. But I know that's a link with blood sugar. But then the converse is true. If you don't eat enough carbs, or to your point, calories, you're going to have a hard time making neurotransmitters like melatonin, because I think I vaguely remember that you need some carbohydrates to get, what is it, tryptophan or tyrosine, or maybe both, across the blood-brain barrier, and then produce serotonin, which then gets turned into melatonin. So there's a sweet spot. You don't want to be having a lot of highs and lows with your blood sugar, but you also don't necessarily want to be so low carb that you're unable to make melatonin, and then that's impacting your sleep. Share.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, usually first I'm like seeing where overall energy is falling. So are they under calories? If they're under calories, that's obviously where I'm going to start. So like, we need to get calories up and see what happens to sleep. And then the carb side of things is really interesting, because I find too, like if you're really low carb, like you don't really have glycogen stores to help you maintain blood sugar at night. So it can lead to a lot more disruption. So, you know, you want to have enough carbs at night, and sometimes even filling the glycogen up at night, maybe having a little bit more carbs in the evening can help with sleep. So I do recommend that in different cases. I think what I see a decent amount too is maybe not in the middle of the night feeling energized, but I do find that people wake up maybe an hour before they need to. Do you get that or hear that a decent amount, where they're like, oh, I wake up at like 5 and I don't have to be up till 6:30 and I can't fall back to sleep. And I'm like pretty energized at that point. And again, I think, you know, like you were saying, cortisol is needed to maintain blood sugar levels. So if you don't have glycogen stores, or have used glycogen stores up because you're either low carb or maybe calories in general are low, your body's going to need some cortisol to go into the bloodstream and bring glucose to the bloodstream to maintain blood sugar levels. So I oftentimes see people either waking up in the night, usually they can fall back to sleep at some point. Maybe they're waking up to pee. I find that that's, again, a big one to look out for. But a lot of times we're just trying to make sure that the meals are balanced, that they're getting enough overall calories, and that maybe slating a little bit more carbs later in the day to see if that helps us sleep. Yeah,
I agree. And I actually have a friend, one of my best friends has been doing the Dave Asprey bulletproof diet for the last month or so. He's been doing a challenge, and she and her husband both feel really, really great doing bulletproof, but she started to notice that it was messing with her sleep a little bit. And they were reading his new book, in conjunction with doing the challenge. And I told her on Marco Polo, I said, oh, it might be that you're too low carb for, production of melatonin and whatnot. So she started throwing in like a sweet potato or like a small serving of rice or something with her evening meal, and noticed that it improved her sleep. And then like a couple of days later, she poloed me and was like, oh, and I just got to the part of the book where apparently Dave Asprey even mentions that in his like Bulletproof, which is kind of a variation of keto, basically.
Yeah.
But even he was like, oh yeah, BT dub, this might happen to your sleep. If that happens, here's what you do. And she was like, yep, you were ahead of me. I didn't get to that part of the book yet. It was like, hey, that's too bad.
Yeah.
It definitely helped.
Yeah.
So just be mindful of that.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I know we talked about this. I was poloing you about like sleep herbs, so maybe we can talk about that too. But I do know, again, glycine you had mentioned on our polos, so I wanted to make sure we touch on that. I think glycine can be a great great amino acid in general for things like glutathione and such. Yeah, so a very talented amino acid. I think we should have a podcast where we go through like different amino acids or just nutrients and like critique them, give them a report card, so to speak.
10 out of 10, would recommend.
Right, but I think that glycine's a great sleep aid as well.
Yeah.
So that can be a good like nutrient to potentially work in the evening, whether you're doing supplementally or like doing a little collagen or something like that.
And on the side, glycine, I don't know if you've gotten like just the plain old powdered glycine. It is scrumptious.
I've never tried that. I typically have done like collagens or gelatins.
Okay. Yeah, just straight up glycine. It's like it kind of reminds me of sugar, honestly. Like if I didn't know any better, I would think that now supplements was putting freaking sugar in the supplement, because that's actually one of my new ones that I'm taking right now. And I revisited it. It had been a while since I had taken it, but I sometimes will use capsules of glycine, or I used to, but I don't like taking capsules right before bed because I always feel like I need to push the capsules down with some food.
Yeah.
So, and I don't want to eat something right before bed. So I got the powder, and it's surprisingly sweet for an amino acid. And I'll usually just like, kind of like what I described with inulin. And I'm pointing because it's on my shelf right there. But I'll like load up a big old spoon, pop it in my mouth, take a swig of water, swish it around, it dissolves, and then I gulp it down. But it really is pretty cheap and pretty effective, and goes down smooth like sugar.
Yeah.
It's quite tasty.
Go ahead.
To the point, it helps you make glutathione. It helps with detoxification. It helps with healing joint tissue and the gut lining, and it's somewhat inhibitory and can help with anxiety and therefore sleep. So it's really a very talented molecule.
Yeah, and I think it's something that because we typically eat muscle meat, we're not getting a ton of. So a lot of times there can be like the methionine glycine balance if you want to get into the weeds, but we eat a lot of muscle meat that's high in methionine, and less like organ meats and fattier type meats that can be a little bit higher in glycine. So getting a little bit of extra glycine can help balance that out and provide some amino acids that are really important that we might struggle to get in the diet. But and I'd love to kind of touch too on the sleep aids that you've used. So we can kind of touch on those. I know we were like messaging about valerian, which we were saying stinky valerian.
God, it's the stankiest herb. Oh my God. I was just sharing this on Marco Polo that we had a beagle who was terrified of thunder and lightning. Absolutely terrified. And I went to the Hippy Dippy bulk herb shop when I lived in Arizona, and I got a couple of different things. I got skullcap and valerian and maybe one other thing at the herbalist recommendation. And I got them home and I opened up the valerian, and it was so pungent. I opened it up, sprinkled some of her dog food. She immediately ate it. She was a beagle, so she would eat literally anything, including poop. So that, low standards is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
But she ate it. She gobbled it up right away. I sealed the container. I put it in a mason jar and I sealed it up. And like half an hour later, my husband came home from school and immediately he was like, what is that smell? Like he could detect it immediately upon entrance to the apartment. And I just laughed because it was long gone by then. But yeah, it was the stankiest thing I've ever stunk. But it can help. It's very, very calming to the point of being sedating. So if you feel like you're a person where you're like, man, I just wish somebody would like knock me out at night, it might not have the same level of effect as like a Benadryl knocking you out, but it does have a much more truly sedating effect to it. But it's one of the only, or maybe the only one I can think of right now. It's the only herb in the nervine category that is warming that I can think of off the top of my head. So it's better suited for people like me who are always cold. I wouldn't think of it quite as much for people who are really warm natured, like what you described, like you get hot in the middle of the night. I don't know if it would be as energetically suited to you, but for corpse people like myself, it could be well suited.
I've tried it in like a tea. I don't know what the percentage would have been in like a over-the-counter tea.
Yeah.
Just like a basic tea that I found at the store that had valerian in it, and I feel like I got hit like pretty quickly, but then it kind of disturbs my sleep. Like I don't know, I'm a weird thing. Like things like CBD, I get really alert from. Like things that tend to be like sedating, I don't know what that means. Like sometimes make me even more alert.
What about, have you ever tried ashwagandha?
I do like ashwagandha.
Does it make you more alert and more woken up, or do you notice any effect cognitively from it?
I feel more alert. Like I just feel I feel pretty good on ashwagandha. Like I'm typically not necessarily like where I have a high level of perceived stress. Anyway, like there's certainly times where I'm stressed out, but like I feel like ashwagandha kind of, I don't necessarily notice like a huge effect one way or another. I just feel kind of stable with it.
Okay. Yeah, because with both ashwagandha and valerian, most people say that they are relaxing, but about, 5 or 10% of the time, people will get stimulated by them. So like I know one patient, I sent her home with a sleep tincture, which is just an alcohol extract with the herbs. And I mixed and matched it and formulated it for her. And the next time we followed up, she was like, yeah, that PM blend actually made me like really wide awake. And I looked at the formula and it had ashwagandha in it. And I'm pretty sure that it was the ashwagandha stimulating her. But that's kind of a less common reaction. Valerian also, I think similar numbers. I think it's like 1 out of 10 people will feel kind of stimulated from it. But most people find that it's sedating. I don't know why. Like what the difference would be. Maybe I'm not a hip enough herbalist person to say for sure, but that's my understanding, is that can happen with both of those herbs.
Yeah.
If you're thinking, well, crap, like I like the sound of getting knocked out a bit before bed and having coming down a peg, but I'm always hot, so what would be the alternative? And I would say probably hops, which thank God this one is not energetically suited to me, because I despise the taste of hops more than anything. But it is a very cooling herb by comparison, and it's not as sedating as valerian. I think even some herbalists say that it is sedating, some say it's not, but it's effective enough that usually people feel a notable effect. Now, you don't want to be an alcoholic, right? Like you don't want to have a beer every night of your life just for the sake of getting good sleep, because then you're probably revving up some inflammation and it's not worth your while. But what I was sharing is that my husband, who loves beer and loves the taste of hops, but again, doesn't want the calories and doesn't want to be an alcoholic, he has been making hops tea, and it's like his new favorite thing. So he will get the hops from like a brewery store, and then he'll make it into a tea, and then he'll put some of it in the freezer and like parse it out and have a little bit of it. And he'll either drink it as like a cold beverage, or sometimes he actually uses, we have one of those soda stream things. He will carbonate the hop tea sometimes and drink it that way. So it's like a cold hop soda, which is like vomit inducing in my opinion.
Oh my gosh.
So you can get creative, or you could use it as a tincture, which would be a little bit less of a hit for alcohol purposes. But hops could be really like effective in that regard too. I really like passion flower, either as a tea or a tincture. It's very good for quieting the mind chatter. So if you have that voice in your head that's like, you know, I have 8 million things to do tomorrow. Did you answer that email? What did you do about that? Who's going to do that? Oh, you have to get to school by 8 a.m. If you have that going on all day, every day, and if that's plaguing you at night, passion flower can help that shut up a bit, and then you can start to doze off more gracefully. I will very frequently use it as a tincture because I tend to do like AM and PM blends for people, but you could use it as a tea as well. It's a very popular tea. And then probably my other favorite, sometimes I'll use CBD, but not always, just because it's expensive, no other reason than that. And then I was telling you that the thing that's helped my sleep most notably is lavender essential oil gel capsules. And for me, it sounds dumb, but for like the last year or year and a half of my life prior to taking this, I was waking up once every night to pee. And I know that sounds like not a big deal, but it was weird for me. And like, as we would, the women in my family would say, I have good puckering strings. So it's not even that like I can't hold my urine, and it's not like I have a little tiny bladder. Like I have good puckering strings. I can hold my urine for a good amount of time, and I think I have a good sized bladder. This is like way TMI. But for some reason, even if I peed right before bed, I would have to wake up in the middle of the night and pee. And it was just like the littlest bit of urine. It wasn't even like a big volume of urine. And I was like, what gives? Like, come on, bladder. I know you can do better than that. And I happened to start taking these lavender gel caps, just like one at dinner, sometimes another one at bedtime. And I was taking it more for stress purposes. And immediately, like the first night I took the lavender, didn't have to wake up to pee. And I have not had to wake up to pee in the middle of the night since starting to take these lavender capsules. So it's hard to say how else, but I think that it helps with anxiety and stress to a point where it allows you to sleep more soundly. So I've observed that the lavender gel caps have been really helpful too. I know Integrative Therapeutics has a product, and I forget the brand now of the one that I take, but it's called Lavender SAP. So you can Google that and find that if you want more info on it.
No, I think that those are great. I can't wait to do that Nervine episode. We've talked about it a whole bunch.
We need to do that.
We have to do a Nervine. I just want to see you go off on herbs.
All the herbs all the time.
All the Nervine herbs.
And the adaptogen one too. We'll need a whole separate episode on adaptogens.
Right.
Like, I like ashwagandha too. I do put ashwagandha in a lot of the PM blends that I do. It's just for like that 5 or 10% of people who get really jazzed up from ashwagandha, I have to take it back out. But yeah, I do usually include it in PM blends because it's just really nice for the adrenals, and most people find it either neutral or maybe a little bit grounding or relaxing. So most people, I can get away with doing that. But play around with it a little bit, see how your body likes it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I like I like all those suggestions. I'm interested to try the lavender. I might have to give that a go too. I don't typically I sleep pretty well. I'm not someone that typically wakes up too much. But I think lavender is such an interesting. I like it. I really like it. I like that it as an essential oil. So I have used it. Kind of aromatically. I've used it. Sometimes I'll put it in my baths.
Randomly enough, I have dried lavender here at my desk. Like, you're an herb nerd when, but just sometimes I'll just like break off a couple of the little lavender doohickeys and like crush it up and smell it.
Yeah.
And it's lovely. I mean, I realized I could have the oil and it would do the same thing. But one of my best friends, like she wanted purple flowers for her wedding. And then when the wedding came, she was kind of pissed because her mom got a bunch of these dried lavender flowers to put like in the aisles. And she was like, no, I wanted like fresh flowers. Anyway, it was this kind of big drama thing. But the take home was that she gave me a whole bunch of bushels of these bouquets of lavender flowers because like nobody else wanted them. And I was like, I'll take them. They smell amazing. And now I have them in a vase sitting next to my desk, funny enough. And every now and then I'll take one off and smell it. Or I had a patient once. She was exhausted after work. And we had our appointment. It was like the last appointment of the day for me. And she was exhausted. And she actually said, she was like, oh man, I hope I can get home because I'm so tired. Like, I hope I don't fall asleep at the wheel. And I was like, oh, that's scary. So I sent her home with a couple of these sprigs. And I was like, at every red light, every time you get, a moment, break off some of these and grind them up in your fingers and smell them. Because like the smell will kind of, lavender doesn't wake you up, but I thought just some sort of unique smell and some sort of stimulation to the olfactory nerve will wake her up enough. And she was able to get home safely. I don't know if it was because of lavender specifically. But yeah, sometimes my little dried lavender flowers come in handy. But I've had them for a few years now. Good thing
That's
they
awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. Love that.
Other supplements that I like or other herbs. I think ashwagandha, passion flower, lavender.
What about skullcap? I know you were talking about skullcap at one point.
I like skullcap a lot. Yeah. There's two forms. There's Chinese skullcap, which is Baikal skullcap. I use that more as an anti-inflammatory.
Okay.
The Baikalan in it is profoundly anti-inflammatory, so I'll use that as a single typically. American skullcap is I use more for the nervine qualities. In one of my herb books, I like the way that he worded it. The author said that skullcap it's a good nervine. It doesn't sedate and it's not particularly like relaxing any more than another nervine. But he said that it can be really helpful for people who just, and again, if you're not on YouTube right now, you're going to miss out on the visual a little bit, but like the way that I picture the skullcap person is like this. Just like kind of like, like looking all around like, and like everything is attacking you. And like every ray of light, every sound, every molecule of air, you're just like, and like tense and like attacked feeling and like cringe. I don't know how to describe the face I just made, but I was like cringing and like tensing up my body a lot. You have to look on YouTube. That's all I got to tell you. But that's kind of like, that kind of tension is what skullcap is really known for soothing. Like the people who feel really like attacked and really just like really profoundly stressed. I like, again, we'll talk more in the nervine episode when we plan that, but there's a lot of other nervines. A lot of them are good for sleep in some way, shape, or form. But probably the one that I use the most is passion flower, if I had to guess.
Okay. Awesome.
Oh, there's one more actually, lemon balm. I really like lemon balm also. And it's dirt cheap and it makes a really yummy tea, or you could do it as a tincture. And word to the wise, if you decide to plant lemon balm because you become so fond of it, it is in the mint family and it will take over your entire yard. Like pretty much. My parents had some on their property. I don't remember if they planted it or if the previous owner planted it, but it is everywhere on their property now. It's hilarious. But what's really cute is, I don't know if I gave him the idea, but my dad started going out and harvesting the fresh lemon balm, and then he would bring it in the house and make a tea. I don't know if he's been doing it lately, but he was kind of getting into that for a little while there, so I'll have to ask him. But yeah, lemon balm is very pleasant tasting, and it's a very nice nervine and can help kind of soothe your nervous system in the evening.
Cool. I think it seems delightful. I think lemon balm just seems like a delightful name.
Mm-hmm.
Passion flower does too. I kind of like when names are appealing.
Yeah, versus like CBD.
Right. Skullcap kind of seems intense. Even though
it's the word skull.
Yeah, right.
Okay, and I have a weird question for you. This is a genuine, honest to God question. If we're talking about the physical anatomical structure, the skull, is that spelled SCULL or SKULL?
I would say K.
Hold on, we'll Google it. Hold on. I'll tell you why I asked that question.
I could be totally wrong. But if I had to pick, it would be the K.
It is K. Google has proven. So
Yay!
I have taken so many anatomy classes, and I never remember. For what it's worth, skullcap is spelled with a C, I think. Oh God, I'm a horrible speller. Anyway, I never know because in the sport of rowing, there are two styles of rowing. You could do sweep rowing or sculling. Sculling is where you have two oars, so you have one oar in each hand, and you do like this kind of motion. Sweep rowing is where you have one oar and you have to kind of pivot out and around your oar to get the furthest reach. And because I was exposed to that during all of the time that I was taking my anatomy classes and whatnot, like high school and college, I was talking about sculling and like doing sculling. It's still to this day, I do not ever remember if it's a C or a K, because sculling, the sport, is spelled with a C, and skull in your head is spelled with a K. And even though I just told you that right now, in a week I will forget it, I guarantee. My neurons are a little crisscrossed because of that sport, but fun fact.
Good to know. But I think I'm glad that I'm surprised that I knew it, because I am constantly spelling stuff wrong.
I've never been known for being the best speller. I would have a much different life if not for spell check and things like what is it? Grammarly. I have Grammarly on my browser.
My gosh.
Oh, it saves my butt every day of my life.
I love that. I need to get into that. Yeah. Oh man.
All right, well, let's see. So we talked a bit about blood sugar. We talked a bit about the evening routine and the habits. I think the habits are the biggest thing. I will just throw this out there that, you can think about all of this from the sense of doing what's right for your body and what your body needs, right? Like putting your oxygen mask on first before tending to other people. But sometimes that's a harder sell, especially for women and especially for mothers. Like they'll take care of everybody else but themselves. So things like sleep get put on the back burner. And it feels too like distant from the gut sometimes. So you could do this for the sake of your own health and the sake of your own well-being. Or I will throw this out there. Your microbes have a circadian clock called the microbial clock, and they get all of their information from you. So if you have a squirrely circadian rhythm, they're going to be having a freaking jamboree at all hours of the night, and they're going to be doing weird shit because they don't know any better, because they're getting all of their signals from you. And primarily it comes from your sleep-wake cycle and your fed-fasting cycle. Those are the biggest things. But if you're not going to do all this for yourself and take care of your own sleep and circadian rhythm for your own good, do it for your microbes, because it's like you have 8 gajillion children in your gut who are waiting on you like, Mom, take care of us. Mom, we need a good circadian rhythm. And they really need you to prioritize your circadian rhythm and your sleep if you stand a chance at making them happy again. So I'll throw that out there.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that there's been, I need to pull it up, but that time restricted eating. So again, I'd have to figure out what was in the study, but a study where that seemed to regulate circadian rhythms a bit. So again, I think you're dead on. Having pretty chaotic meal patterns, I think, could be a big problem when it comes to your microbial circadian rhythms. And again, sleep wake, we've talked a lot about that, but the meal timing piece can be really huge.
Yeah.
for a lot of people. And again, like, I think it's probably unrealistic to think that you're going to eat at the same time every single day for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So I usually say it's like progress, not perfection. I think that's with everything.
Agreed.
So, I mean, if you're hitting it most of the time, that's what matters. But yeah, I agree. It's you thinking of it as what's going on with your microbial circadian rhythms is huge.
Yeah. And even there's a study, I'll have to look in a second and see what year this was. But if you want to take a really wild trip down the internet alley, there's a paper titled Effects of Dim or Bright Light Exposure During the Daytime on Human Gastrointestinal Activity. It was a Japanese study. They were looking at humans, and basically they controlled what the people were eating, but then they divided up these, I think, 11 participants into people who were exposed to dim light during the day or people who were exposed to bright light during the day. They had the same exact food. And then what they did was they did a washout period, so I think a day or two, where they went back to normal, and then they came back in and they did the other thing. So if you did the dim light the first time, you went through the washout period for a couple of days, and then you came back in and you did the same study with bright light. But they actually measured gastric activity, or I think gastric emptying after the dinner meal, and breath hydrogen. Now, they weren't specifically testing for SIBO, but you want to talk about something that's crazy for SIBO, like a big, big, big change. And some of these people, when you look at the graph, which I have pulled up here, when you look at the graph, the difference between the dim light and the bright light for some of these people, I guarantee would have made the difference between a positive or a negative SIBO breath test. So yeah. It makes you wonder about people who are going and getting a SIBO breath test and their sleep sucks. And it could be that the magic pill to cure SIBO is actually better sleep. So again, the title is Effects of Dim or Bright Light Exposure During the Daytime on Human Gastrointestinal Activity. Oh, and the gastric emptying was better as well in the bright light group.
Yeah.
And it is a 2003 paper. But yeah, if you want a really wild trip and you want to talk about circadian rhythm with SIBO, I mean, that's pretty freaking wild that they were studying that even in 2003 before SIBO became a big thing. Now again, they didn't specifically talk about SIBO. They just measured the total volume of exhaled hydrogen throughout, I think, like the 60 minutes or whatever it might have been.
Yeah.
So they weren't timing it and plotting it like a SIBO breath test. But I guarantee you some of those people would have had a positive SIBO breath test in the dim light and a negative SIBO breath test with bright light exposure.
Yeah, no, it's wild. I think it's wild how big of an effect it could have. And I do think that, I mean, one thing that we haven't totally talked about in detail is that, you know, gut function, which you were describing, really wants to like be scheduled. Like your body wants to have a schedule of when you're eating and when you're not eating it, so it can regulate digestive capacity, like, you know, enzymes, stomach acid. Right, enzymes, stomach acid, bile flow. And I think bile flow is a really interesting one.
We should do an episode on bile and the gallbladder.
We definitely should. But I think bile flow is something that's really, and something Dave Mayo talks a lot about in some of his circadian rhythm stuff, is the bile flow being really affected by circadian rhythm changes. And I think that probably plays a big role in the motility piece, because motility gets affected when your circadian rhythms get off. So I think, you know, even just thinking in terms of digestive capacity, like if you want to boost digestive capacity, well, and that probably in and of itself is going to affect what microbes are growing and aren't growing. Getting meal timings and sleep wake cycle sorted out for the most part. Again, it's not like, I don't expect you to like not go to a wedding or leave a wedding early.
Yeah. Because
you have to be in bed by 10 p.m. or whatever your bedtime is. Like you still have to live your life. The benefits of staying at a wedding and enjoying yourself will outweigh the negatives of missing your circadian cycle. So there's definitely a balance between what we were saying earlier, living your life and hitting some of these goals.
Yeah.
And you have to make those calls. But I think it can be a really, really big factor. And I think a lot of times people hear this stuff where they're like, oh, like this is beneficial. But as I was saying earlier, like so much of the focus and energy is on diet, like the diet side of things, like, oh, I just got to keep restricting and that'll help. And I only have so much time and energy to focus on strategies. I'm going to focus on the restriction. Maybe I incorporate a little bit of this stuff, but I can't totally hit it because I'm so wrapped up in the restrictive side of things. Yeah. It's really hard to focus. Yeah, so it's hard to focus on other things. So I just find that opening up and kind of veering away from spending so much time and energy on the diet, I think allows you to spend more time and energy on sleep and circadian rhythm stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have another question came into my mind that I'm curious to get your answer on. Have you ever seen a situation where healing the gut or working on the gut profoundly helped sleep, or do you think it's usually the other way around?
Such a great question, because again, if there's dysbiosis in the gut, that certainly kind of right, that certainly is going to affect sleep. So I've definitely seen situations where people's sleep seems to have tanked, like after antibiotics, or like, after a food poisoning event, or after some of these major changes in the microbiome, which I find really interesting. And then once we start to kind of get the microbiome in a better place, sleep improves. So I've definitely seen that with some of my clients. So I sort of view it as like you definitely want to make sure that you're doing everything habitually that's going to help from a sleep-wake standpoint, but then also keeping an eye on what's going on in the gut and doing things that are going to reinforce your good microbes and help to keep the bad microbes at bay is helpful for sure.
Yeah, I think I probably have seen it be much more. I think that the progression is that stress and habits and exercise feed into the sleep thing, and then the sleep thing feeds into the gut thing, in addition to the others directly feeding into the gut thing. I haven't seen any cases that I can think of where like we started them on antimicrobials, or we started them on prokinetics, or we started them on something and they specifically were like, wow, I'm sleeping better. Usually we have to focus on the sleep or the stress, or the anxiety, or the mental health stuff in conjunction with the gut. But I think that a lot of people with good reason have this mentality where it's like, oh, if I heal the gut, then everything else will be better. And like, oh, if I heal the gut, then the autoimmunity magically goes away. Or if I heal the gut, then this will magically go away. And that can happen. But I find that with sleep, like that doesn't seem to always pan out quite precisely.
Right.
I haven't found like a miracle gut protocol for getting better sleep necessarily, but if you work on sleep and you address that piece of it, it can definitely impact the gut. So I tend to see it more strongly in that direction as opposed to gut backward. But theoretically, I could see both happening. It's just that clinically I've seen the one play out far more frequently.
Yeah, and I feel like it's probably hard to really isolate that too, because like most of the time when I'm working with people, it's like we're getting the diet piece in a better place, we're getting the stress piece, and like we're working on so many different things that, probably the stuff that we're talking about, habits and things that affect sleep, we're doing that simultaneously with helping with the microbiome. So it would be really hard to tell. Like rarely am I doing anything that's just modulating the microbiome without looking at habitual things. So it would be hard for me to totally isolate that. But yeah, you're right. I think for the most part, a lot of the lifestyle, circadian rhythm type habits create an environment for good microbes to thrive and and kind of sketchier microbes to not grow as easily. So when you have those environmental factors helping your microbiome in a lot of ways, I think that, doing stuff that tries to modulate the microbiome without those factors probably won't be as effective.
Yeah.
So I think you almost have to have those foundational pieces in place for microbiome like modulation to actually be successful most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Well, all right. We have been talking about sleep for a mighty long time, and I've loved every single moment of it, including our amazing introduction, which I'm still kind of cracking up over. I hereby propose that we leave that completely unedited, just us attempting one after the other, so that people can get a good chuckle at us. But I think that is officially a wrap, folks. So I sure hope that in the, let's see, hour and 50 minutes that we've been talking, that I hope that we covered all of your questions about sleep. But by all means, if you have other questions, please do comment on YouTube or email us at ibsfreedompod@gmail.com. Shout out at Instagram at ibs.freedom.podcast on Instagram. And we will catch you on the flippity flip. You know the drill. Leave us a 5-star reviews, please and thank you, or subscribe on the YouTube channel, comment, like, do all the things you do on YouTube, and we will be happy to see you next time here on the IBS Freedom Podcast. Toodaloo.